Hello, I'm just going to work through solving the Bill Murray positioning task. Now, obviously, I know the answer, so I'm going to try to pretend like I don't know what the answers are. It can be a pretty challenging thing to do this. This is a relatively simple one to start off with. Remember, you're using what you know about the box model, so that basically means margins and padding and setting the height and width of elements, and also using float and clear potentially to position things horizontally. So the first thing I would do looking at this, now obviously you're not being given a nice wireframe here, you're being given a screenshot of what the finished thing should look like. I'd look for obvious patterns here. So for example, I can see that there's an obvious pattern of a title, a little bit about the film, and then an image underneath it. We've got that there, and then again here, and again here. Three of them taking up the full width of the page there. Now, when we think about widths and heights, we can deal with pixels and various other units of measurement. But if we want our page to be truly responsive to the device and the viewing area that's being viewed in, then percentages are a good idea. So we can think about percentages. I can estimate things here. You'll find there's a bit of trial and error involved a lot of the time. But you know, we've got three things across the full 100% width of the page here. So about 33% being taken up by each thing, and there's a big gap in between them. So there's a big gap there, another gap there. Now I can sort of try to judge roughly how much that is. If I was to imagine, I'll look at this last one, Scrooged. If I was imagining a little line along, a little division there, halfway between Scrooged and Groundhog Day, and so the whole of Scrooged is taking up 33% roughly of the width of the page. Then within that, I can try to work out roughly how much this little gap here is, and how much the gap here is, the margins between each each bit about each film. So I mean, you can get your ruler out if you want. I actually sort of use my thumb. You can't see me doing it, but and I also know the answer, so I end up coming to a value, and you can get this with a bit of trial and error. The value that I come to is that's about now let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe about 8 of those fit in. 8 of that distance there fits in from here to here. It's a bit of maths. So about an eighth of 33%, about 4% roughly. So anyway, you need to analyze the page a bit. Don't just totally dive in and without having a bit of a plan. So I'm going to split up the page into 3 bits based on this pattern here, and I've got a bit of an idea. Now let's have a look at the code. This fairly messy code, which for some reason has disappeared. We don't need all that extra stuff. You can get rid of it if you want. It doesn't cause any problems. It just appeared one day. I can't remember why. I'm going to just tidy it up a little bit here. So what have we got? Bill Murray, bit about him, bit about Groundhog Day, bit about Scrooge. So we split these up. Now we know from that 5 we can use divs, and I think I made this task before we did semantic elements, so the solutions have divs in them, but actually I'm going to use a semantic element. This is a section. So we've got 3 sections there, I reckon. Now these were quite easy tasks to make up in a way, because I just did a page and then tried to remove all the CSS. It is a lot harder working it out. Let me indent those, make it a bit more readable. Okay, so I've got 3 sections. Now section obviously does nothing at the moment. It doesn't change the way the way it looks at all. It just splits up just like a div does. But now, using what we know about float, if I tell Kingpin to float to the left, that means the thing beneath it will push up to the right hand side of it. And if I tell this to float to the left, then that means the thing beneath it will push up to the right hand side of that. And if I tell this to float to the left, then anything beneath it would float to the right hand side of it. But there is nothing there. If I did have more beneath it and I didn't want it going up beside it, I could use clear on this. But at the moment, even though this doesn't need to be floating left, there's a pattern we can use here to do things a bit more efficiently. So they're all going to be styled in the same way, so it would make sense to give them a class. And of course, you remember that from N5. We could give each of them a different ID, but that would be kind of stupid. We've got a pattern here, so a class is ideal. If you don't already use keyboard shortcuts, by the way, like Control C, Control V, Control X, try to get into the habit of them. It'll make you work far more efficiently. Okay, and we're just doing everything in this internal style sheet. Again, I could do an external style sheet. I'm just going to do it internally here because it's just a single page. And of course, you could do inline styles, but we know better than that. If we're able to do stuff which applies to the whole page, then let's do it either internal or external style sheets. So we've got class movie. Now, what have I decided? I reckon if each of those sections floats to the left, float to the left. And let's have a quick look. That's panned out. Right, that's starting to take shape. At least they're moving up next to each other. And now let's think about the widths and the margins and things. So I reckon each one is taking out approximately a third of the page, so approximately 33%. I reckoned that. Whoa. Did I just click on something? No, I don't think so. I reckoned that this is what I'm looking for. The margins were about an eighth that way. So the numbers I'm coming up with are about 4% for the margins, which leaves me with about 25% for the width of each thing. So let's just go width 25%. Now, as I say, I could do this as pixels, but then when we view it on a massive screen or we view it on a much smaller screen, things don't adjust automatically. So using percentages is definitely recommended. With 25%, which would mean, so I'll do things sort of long hand here, about a 4% margin. And what am I going? Margin right as well, I reckon 4%. Now, quickly see how that is looking. If 5 refreshes, okay, that's looking a little bit better, I think. You might be thinking, oh, it looks totally, there are massive gaps and stuff. Well, it's a bit hard to tell, because if let me just drag this off here onto its own thing. Oh, come off it. There we go. And then resize it a little. So here you'll see the percentages hopefully having an effect. So it adjusts there. So it depends what device you're viewing it on, how wide it is, and that's far better than just putting a certain number of pixels in. You can get it working at the exact right size for the screen you're viewing it on, and then someone else looks at it and it looks, they go and have a look on their mobile phone and it looks like that. Now, of course, we'd have to get it truly responsive, we'd have to do the same with the images, the width and the height of the images, which we're not required to do here, so I'm not going to bother, but feel free to play about with that. It's not looking quite right yet. I'd say it looks just about right. This needs pushed in. Okay, that needs pushed in with a similar margin, so it needs a left margin there. Let's go back to this. So, I mean, I could probably just put this in its own section. There we go. Whoops. And remember, as I say, div would work, but if we're able to use a semantic element, then we should. If we're able to use an element which explains what this is a section of the page. Again, I could do things in different ways. Let's just call it intro. I could do just a little bit of inline style there if I want. You know, what am I doing? What am I doing? Turns out it's quite hard to think through this out loud sometimes. Right, so ID, intro. I gave it an ID. I could have given it a class, but an ID, it's the only one on the page. And let's give it margin left of 4% as well. So remember, the way the percentages work is a percent of the parent element. So you should have the idea of parents and children now. So if body's the parent element, which it is for section, each of these sections, their parent is body, then when I set the margin left for this section, it's setting it as a percentage of the body, and the body's the full width of the page. If I set the margin on each one as 4%, then it would be as a percentage of the width of this section, okay, of its parent. Okay, so the idea of parent and children is quite important when you're working with percentages. Anyway, let's see how that's looking. Looks a bit better to me. I think, let's have a look, remind myself what it's supposed to look like. Looks okay, doesn't it? I'm not sure there's too much else I'm missing. Yeah, I think then there's one other thing I'd like to do, and that is just, again, try to make this slightly more efficient. We can generalize this a bit more. So the way the code's done here, we've got inline styles for each of the images. Now, as I say, they'd be better, it'd be more responsive if it was done as a percentage, and then it would adjust along with everything else. But for now, let's just say we've spotted this pattern, height of 400 pixels. I'm just going to copy that. All the images are like that. Now, if there were other images on the page, I could give each input of these images in a class. Maybe I should. When there aren't any other images on the page, excuse me, then I can just style images. But I don't know. Maybe I should do it properly, shouldn't I? Class equals movie image. I'm really struggling to type here. And then let's put that there. So they're all in the same class. And then I can do a movie image thing up here, which is far more efficient, a little bit more stylish. So what am I doing? Height 400 pixels. God, look at this indentation and stuff. Right, let's have a look at that. Should still look the same. Yeah. Okay. I hope that's helped. If you were struggling to work through, I'm going to try the same with the other positioning tasks. They get a bit harder, I would say. Good luck. Let me know any problems.